Bismillah. Hopefully that doesn't fall off. Yeah, jazakallah khair. Who's Sheikh Amir? You got it?
Then if you want to join the Google Meet as well, so we can go live there. And then I'll give you most access. I couldn't give it to you unless you're inside the class as well.
You can't give me what?
I can't give you host access unless you're actually inside the thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Walaikum salam wa barakatuh. Actually, can you get Amir? I'm not sure. He's telling me to sign into the Google Meet or whatever, but it's not letting me in right now. So I don't know if he's got me. And otherwise, we just gonna have to start without it.
Why you gotta get off? You don't gotta get off of me. No. How you doing?
Even though it's cold in wintertime. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. It's not letting me in, man. It's not letting me in.
Go to Google Class.
It won't even let me.
Oh, it's not loading.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi?
I'm on the Wi-Fi.
I think there's maybe too many devices on the Wi-Fi.
Oh, for real?
It's probably
Tell somebody?
No, I didn't.
Because we don't help people.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just
Let me see if I can do it from here. Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah, it's like So just be patient with us, y'all. All this 2023 technology business. Allah understand. طيب. Can y'all see that clearly? Off one. Sisters in the back, can y'all see that clearly? Well, thank you for keeping honest. خلاص. It's as good as it gets. Alright, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم وعلى آله الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه الطيبين ومن استنى بسنتهم إلى يوم الدين ثم أما بعد. We begin as we should and as we do all things with the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the especially merciful. And we ask Him and Him alone to send His peace and His blessings upon our dear and beloved teacher, leader, and guide, and the best of examples, Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his pure family, his good companions, and all of those who would attempt to follow in their footsteps until the day that we meet our Creator. Allahumma ameen. That's what follows. So, inshallah, I want to firstly say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome everybody. Alhamdulillah, this is going to be our second session covering the Qasidah, Qasidah Lamiyyah, the Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, or the poem where every line ends with Lam, the Lamiyyah poem of Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Alhamdulillah, last week we had our first session and we covered a number of different house rules for the class and expectations and also the virtues of knowledge. And we covered a number of other things. So today we're going to be doing three things, possibly four, inshallah. Number one is a quick review for those of you who were here about what we covered last week. So I do expect as much as possible for everybody to be participating. So that means, please don't be coming here expecting that you're just going to be kind of like sitting on your laurels, meaning that you don't just kick back and just kind of soak up everything in. Like I said everything that's said. Like I said last week, unless you got the memory, didactic, photographic memory of Imam Shafi'i, then just be sure and certain, right, that I might call on you, ask some questions for those who were here last week, inshallah, and then even throughout the class. So number one is a quick review. Just want 1 point, bullet points. What did we cover last week from you all? Then number two, today we're going to be covering briefly the biography of Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. This is some other information. The brief biography of Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Just a few highlights of his life and kind of like who he was or what are some of his accomplishments. And then we're going to start covering the actual poem itself. And the way that we're going to be doing that is every session, every week, moving forward, we'll cover 2 lines. So if there's 16 lines to the poem, how many days should we finish? In how many days should we finish? Give or take about 8 days. Every day, 2 lines. All right? So, inshallah, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get started then. This is هذا هو. طيب. So, mind you, this has very little to nothing to do with what we talked about last week. So if you're looking up there, it's not going to help. What did we cover last week? And I'll usually give a couple of minutes for brave souls to kind of volunteer. And then if we don't, we can't abide by awkward silences. That means I'm going to just start calling on, inshallah. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember that smile. You was here last week. One thing that we covered last week. And it's just bullet point, all right?
We covered the virtues of seeking knowledge.
The virtues of seeking knowledge. And since I already said that, tell me one thing or one virtue of seeking sacred knowledge.
Makes the path to Jannah easier.
Say that again.
Makes the path to Jannah easier for you.
It makes the path to Jannah easier. And it makes it even easier there more when you hear that just after the salah. Alhamdulillah. Now, but that's very true now. Jazakallah khair. Was you here last week? Sheikh, now.
The second one is the inhabitants of the heavens and earth ask for forgiveness for the seeker of sacred knowledge.
And that's considered one of the what of sacred knowledge?
The benefits.
One of the benefits or the virtues of sacred knowledge. And when you say the inhabitants, who are you namely or mainly, who is the Prophet ﷺ mainly speaking about?
The animals, the angels.
Mainly the angels, right? The angels, the malaika, right? لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. They don't disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't falter in His commands. They do whatever He tells them. They're sinless. So if He's making dua for you, bidnillahi ta'ala, that dua will be answered. Now, I see you looking at your notes. You got one, brother?
Yeah, the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets.
The scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. And what do they inherit from them? A whole bunch of gold and cryptocurrency and,
The prophets, when they die, they leave behind not gold or silver, but knowledge. So the scholars inherit that knowledge.
Yes, I know. Tayyib. And where are you getting that from, brother?
My notes, right here.
Your notes. That's based off of what, though?
I think is it based off of hadith?
It's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, Tayyib. Okay. Yeah, I remember them curls anywhere, yeah.
Your knowledge benefits others.
Huh?
Your knowledge benefits others.
How so?
Teach it to the person next to you who doesn't know as much as you, or someone doesn't attend the class as you.
So the knowledge in and of itself doesn't benefit the other people, but you doing what?
Teaching it down.
By you teaching, by you sharing, by you enjoining the good, by you forbidding the evil. Not simply, all my shahadas, my degrees sitting up there on the wall, and you'd be like, all of y'all are benefactors of that. No. It's when you're engaged in and committed to serving, helping the community by teaching, educating, whether it's your little brother, your sister, your parents, your cousin, your neighbor, but that's how your knowledge is a benefit. By you applying it and you calling to it. It's very, very important. You want to make that clarification, Otherwise, it's just going to sit up under them curls. Allah understand. Now, any sisters? Yes, go ahead, sis. Aqidah is the foundation of the religion. As a matter of fact, that's one of the titles or names that's given, right, to the science of Aqidah. Like there's tafsir, right, from the word fassara yufassiru, right, which means to explain or to elaborate. That's the science of Quranic exegesis, if I'm not mistaken, to explain the meaning of the Quran. That's what that science is, tafsir. And Aqidah, that's the science of studying, right, the creed and the belief of the Muslims. And one of the titles that it has, aside from Aqidah, right, is Usul ad-Din. Right? Matter of fact, in the Islamic University of Medina, they have the College of Sharia, they have the College of Hadith, they have the College of Lugha, Arabic language, and then they have the College of Usul ad-Din, the fundamentals or the foundation of the religion. Tayyib. Jazakallah khair, sister. Everybody feet. Oh, and that's because that's what they major in. It's their main thing that they study is the Aqidah. Tayyib. I think that's enough, inshallah. So now, there's a couple of other things because I want to make sure that we get through what we have today. The other things that we covered, it's not so much a controversy, but the difference of opinion regarding whether or not Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he was the author of this book, right? But we take the position following after a number of other scholars. For example, Sheikh Ahmed Ibn Abdullah al-Mardawi, right? He's a notable Hanbali scholar. He has a whole explanation of Lamiyyah written, probably one of the first known detailed explanations of this poem Lamiyyah, right? And there's others as well, Sheikh Jabreen, rahimahullah, Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Abbad, and others, right? And there are some who say that it's not, right? But nonetheless, we said in spite of that, right, that difference of opinion, even though they have some compelling evidence to show that it is from him, even if it wasn't, for the sake of argument, the content of the book is worthy of study and still being paid attention to, learned, memorized, because it is based on the Quran, the Sunnah, and it covers, like the sister Jazakallah Khair mentioned about Aqidah, that's all it's talking about, right? And it's the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So that's the benefit of studying the poem. And then lastly, strongly encourage and remind everybody, right, that you should make an earnest attempt to try to memorize this poem. Like I said, it's only 16 lines. And if we're covering 2 lines every day, and that's it, in 8 weeks, right? Imagine if you just took 2 lines, what's today, y'all? Thursday, right? So let's say you started today and you took 2 lines. You got all week up until next week for just 2 lines. For just 2 lines. Then the next week, you take 2 more lines. And you got all week to just memorize 2 lines. And is there anybody in here who didn't go to Duxi? Yeah, I didn't think so. Myself included. Everybody went to madrasa. Everybody went Saturday, Sunday school, right? Everybody, at one time or another, you've had, you got to memorize something. It might have been half a page, a whole page, And I'm not even telling you to push that. I'm saying, how many, Sheikh? 2 lines, bas. Right? Inshallah. And what we're going to do in that vein is we're going to put some resources in the Google Classroom for the students who have registered. But then when you go there, we'll have like the poem and some links, right, to different reciters reciting the poem so that you can listen to it, that it'll aid and help you in the memorization process, right? But all you need, right, is consistency. All you need is consistency and time, right? You give yourself some time, and if you're consistent with it, right, even if memorizing for you might be a challenge or difficult, you give it time and you're consistent at it, right? Even water can crush stone. Even water, over time, can crush stone. And I don't think any of y'all's heads are as hard as stones and rocks. Inshallah. Now, tayyib. So, first things first is, who is Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah? His name, right? His name is Ahmed ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam ibn Abdullah ibn Abu Qasim ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani. Now, for the purposes of our class, I'm only expecting you to know Ahmed ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam. That's it. Just those 3. But Abdullah, Abu Qasim, etc., I'm not expecting you, or even al-Harrani, right? And I'll get to that in a second, but I'm just expecting to remember the 3. So his actual name isn't Ibn Taymiyyah. That's just a title, all right, that he had, or excuse me, that's what people used to call him, the son of Taymiyyah, right? But his actual name is Ahmed, the son of Abdul Halim, the son of Abdul Salam. So Abdul Halim, he's Ahmed. Who's Abdul Halim?
His father.
So only this brother knows? Yeah, Jama'ah. Abdul Halim is who? That's his dad. And then Abdul Salam is his what? His grandfather. All right, he was born in the year 661 Hijri, meaning he was born 661 years after the migration or the hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from Mecca to Medina. 661 years later, Ibn Taymiyyah was born. Tayyib? And he was born in the city Harran, Syria. And subhanAllah, his father, his grandfather, and some of his brothers were notable scholars. In particular, they were Islamic jurists in the Hanbali madhab, right? And they were renowned scholars, right, in their area. And subhanAllah, the Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah himself learned from them and studied under them and memorized Quran with them, right, early on. And so he had that kind of like upbringing from jump, right, to be on the track and on the road to becoming a scholar. And you'll see that, right? Oftentimes you'll see like athletes, for example, right? Somebody who's an NFL player or whatever, they start early with their kids, having them practicing, having them training, tweaking their diet, working with them, right? Having them play little league. Then they're playing in middle school, then in high school, traveling team. Even when it's off season, they're playing on, So you can imagine like that, Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah, he's grown up in a household reading, memorizing, learning, fatwa, research, advice, counsel, all of that's going on. And this is the environment that he grew up in. All right? And so, subhanAllah, however, early in his life, his family ended up having to pick up and leave from Haran due to the Tatar or the invading Mongols, right? From Mongolia, right? Y'all ever heard of Genghis Khan? Right? Those are the Mongolians, right? Kublai Khan and so on. Al-Muhim, they were invading and pushing into the Muslim lands, and as they got closer, right? Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, his family, they picked up and they went to Damascus or Dimashq, all right? And they lived there for a time. And of course, Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he didn't stop learning. He didn't only learn with his family. He learned from a number of notable scholars in his time. But look it, by the age of 19, this sheikh is like a prodigy. He's already allowed and given license to give fatwa by the age of 19. That means, and you're giving fatwa, that means you are a legal jurist, a faqih, and an expert, and you can't just be an expert at fiqh. That means you're an expert at fiqh. Qawahid fiqhiyya, usul al-fiqh, like legal maxims, how to even use principles and extract rulings. Is this halal or haram from the Quran and the Sunnah? There's a means and a methodology and a way of doing that. Usul al-fiqh and qawaid fiqhiyya. Tafsir, lughat al-arabiyyah, the Arabic language. You have to be an expert in those things, right? And he's already given license, meaning by other sheikhs and other teachers and other scholars, he can go ahead and teach and give fatwa at the age of 19, and he was continuing to teach, and he did so up until his death. He continued to teach, he continued to preach, he continued to call to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the book of Allah, the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the way of the Salaf until his death. Subhanallah, there is a couple of distinguishing things about Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah. One of the first things that makes him a standout from other scholars is that he was a scholar and a warrior. So Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, when the Mongols continued to push into the Muslim lands and encroach on Muslim lands, right? What he did was, as you would think of a scholar doing, inspiring and motivating the people to repel and to fight, right, and to join in the fight against, right, these invading armies. He would advise the Khalifa, right, the political leadership of the Muslims, right, to fight them, to stand up against them. This is something that's necessary, must be done, in the ways that you would think of as a scholar, someone who's reading books, research, etc. But then not only that, but he participated on multiple occasions, right, laysa bil qalam, lakin bis sayf, in fighting in different battles. Right? So he was a warrior and a scholar. So this is one distinguishing thing that really stands out about Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah. And then something else that is interesting about him as well is that he was not shy about engaging in debates, right, against those who went against the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And he oftentimes would use their very own principles and their very own the understanding, right, against them, whether it was philosophy, whether it was Christianity, whether it was Ahlul Bid'ah, etc., right? And there were times, numerous times, where it wasn't because he wanted to directly engage them in open debates and so on. That wasn't something, that's not typical of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that you go looking for, hey, let me debate you, and let me debate you, and let's go at it right, go at it with you. But rather, oftentimes, he was forced to because of different opinions that he had, right? Where he, early in his life, he was considered to be what you would call, right, from the Hanbali school of fiqh, right? That was his madhab, early on. But eventually he grew out of that, right? And became what they would call a mujtahid, where we would say he's making rulings, right? Independent of the madhab, but not independent of the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And the statements of the Salaf, the Sahaba, Ridwanullahi alayhim, right? That's called a mujtahid, right? Where they make independent rulings, but based on the Quran, the Sunnah, right? And the Salaf, and then a mas'ala comes to them and they make a decision on it, right? Based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, based on this hadith here, based on the understanding of the Sahaba, this would seem to be, this is the right decision. Does that make sense, y'all? Right? Trying to keep it as simple as possible. So at any rate, but there are different decisions that he had, because at that time, the scholars of that time and many of the people that were very entrenched in the four madhahib, and it was very frowned upon under any circumstance to go outside of a particular madhab. The four madhahib. It used to be very, very frowned upon, right? And yet he would do that from time to time. And so what would happen is, then if those people, if they had happened to curry favor with the Khalifa of that time, right? So for example, imagine you have like the leader who's the Khalifa or Sultan or whatever, Sultan. He's going to have his court. So he's got advisors, right? He's got poets. He's got, etc. in his court. And he also has some scholars. Now, during Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah's time, the scholars who had the ear of the Sultan or the Khalifa at that time, right? They were not from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? On a number of different issues, especially in issues of Aqeedah. And so they would tell the Khalifa, yo, Sheikh al-Islam, he has a different opinion on this. This goes against the state opinion, the state endorsed opinion, or the opinion endorsed by the leadership. Yo, you need to call him in. And then they would debate, right? And this happened to him multiple occasions, right? And here's the thing. Again, another distinguishing factor, although Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah isn't the only one who this happened to. Matter of fact, many of scholars, Imam Malik was in prison on occasion, and other scholars, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was imprisoned on occasions. So Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he was also in prison, but he was in prison multiple times until he eventually died in prison. So he would have an opinion on something, they would debate that opinion, he would bring his evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, and he would not back down. Now he's not just getting canceled. He's not just getting, we're not going to talk to you or call you or sell your products or push your books, Sheikh al-Islam. We're not going to sell your writings. No, it's not like that. Like today. They said, we're going to put you in prison. Sometimes even physical punishment. But he never relented. He never backed down on every single occasion. Until finally, in the last 3 years of his life, again, he was in prison in what's known as, it's a famous prison called the Citadel, where he spent the last 3 years of his life until he died in prison, exactly because of a particular opinion he had. And if I remember correctly, it was the opinion that pronouncing divorce 3 times in one sitting, right? Before was considered, that's considered 3 divorces. 3 pronouncements of divorce in one occasion, on one sitting, was considered 3 divorces. Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, right, had the opinion, right, because it was becoming very easy. People were taking it very lax about the issue of divorce. He took the stance, and he had his evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, but that was his opinion, that no, it's only considered 1. People are basically using it as a cop-out to easily get out of marriages and responsibilities, and they're taking it too lightly. Al-Muhim, long story short, that was not the state-sanctioned opinion, you could say, from the scholars who are supported by the leadership. And so they essentially told on him, but he didn't back down, and so they imprisoned him, right, for 3 years. His And he died in the year 728 Hijri, and it's said that, or it's reported that 50,000 people attended his janazah. This is just to show, or as an indication, the love that the people had, right? Even though the leadership, right, was upset with him, had other ideas about him, right? The dedication and the service that Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah had for the people, right, was evident. And so that many people showed up, right, because of them feeling like the ummah is hit, right? And we got to be there to pray the janazah and support our brother and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him. And we ask Allah azza wa jal, right, that he give him the best of reward, right? Khayr jaza' an al-Islam wal Muslimin. Allahumma ameen. طيب, some of the notable students of Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, there are more than what I'm mentioning here, but these are some of the standout ones, the stellar students. Is Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, right? Which also, just like Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, that's not his name. His name is Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr. Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah, also that's not his name. His name is Muhammad ibn Ahmed. And Imam Ibn Kathir, or Ismail ibn Umar, also his name is not Ibn Kathir. And then Imam al-Bazzar. Now, each one of these scholars, right, are a testament to the tremendous character and scholarship and mentorship of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Because each one of these names that you see up here, they themselves became notable and prolific scholars in their own right. Each of them to this day, right, are almost, if not as famous, especially Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, almost as famous as their sheikh and their teacher, right? Which is not unheard of, right? That when the teacher, right, he pours so much into his student that eventually, and this is something that any true teacher would want, is that their student surpasses them. Al-Muhim, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he is known as the doctor of the heart. Much of what his writings, regardless of the topic, he could be talking about tafsir, he could be talking about hadith, he could be talking about, seerah, but he never strayed far away from tazkiyat an-nafs. And you could say he was able to harmonize what we would think of as like spirituality, right, with like human psychology. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. And I highly encourage you, many of his books are available in English. I highly, highly encourage every last one of you to look at his readings and his writings. And if I had to suggest some particular ones, I would say Ad-Da' wa Dawa, right? The Disease and Its Cure. It's a book also known as Al-Jawab al-Kafi, Liman Sa'ala an Ad-Dawa al-Shafi, right? The answer to the one who's asking about the potent cure, right? And that's like a rough translation. But if you just look up disease and the cure, you'll find that book. That's one I would highly recommend. And it really talks about the nature of sins, battling sins, and how to overcome them, and how to deal with them and handle them. And he does it in a very beautiful manner. But al-Muhim, and he has another book that is monumental, that any real student of knowledge should have, is Zadul Ma'ad, the provisions for the hereafter. Also available in English, right? And there's a Mukhtasar, right? I think it's printed out by Darul Salam, but it's a very, very important book going into the life of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but in a very unique way. And then Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah, also famous scholar, most notably, or one of the most notable books that he wrote, it's like a compendium called Sir A'lam al-Nubala. It's in like 30 volumes, right? I have in my house, it's in 30 volumes, right? Each book is like 600-700 pages, right? And he essentially collected the biographies of numerous scholars, including, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Khulafa al-Rashidun, and then, scholars of every field of Islamic sciences, right? So he's got scholars in Lugha, right? Their biographies and their history and their contribution to Islam and its legacy, right? As well as, Mujahidun and other ulama, right? Sir A'lam al-Nubala, I guess it would be called the biography of the luminous stars. Sir A'lam al-Nubala. طيب. And then Imam Ibn Kathir, right? Almost everybody here should know who that is, right? Who is Ibn Kathir? Oh, what work do most of us know? Tafsir, Ibn Kathir, right? Right? To this day, right? That he wrote that, what's that? 8th century Hijri, right? The 8th century Hijri, and right now we're in the 15th century Hijri. That's like, That's 700-800 years ago. He wrote that book. And to this day, right? Most of y'all even know Tafsir ibn Kathir. But that's not all. He has books in history. He has books in fiqh. He has books in lugha, right? He's got Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, which is known as the beginning and the end, right? Where essentially he writes everything. The history of everything. Starting from creation, right? Or before creation, to the creation of Adam alayhi salam, all the way up to, right, all of the prophets and their peoples and their messengers and their stories, right, to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all the way up into his time. So the different dynasties that existed up until his time, right, the different peoples and their histories, major cities, right, and so on. Massive work, right? And that book, I'm not aware of if it's in English. But, I'm not aware if it's in English. But al-Muhim. And then Imam al-Bazar, also notable scholar as well. And he has a number of works in hadith as well. My point, though, is that what? They are the legacy of Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah. And it speaks to his prolific teaching, the impact that he had on his students, the type of man that he was, the character that he had, right? That they would go on, right, under his after being under his tutelage and being his disciples and being his close followers. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, and I almost forgot to mention, those 3 years when he was in Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah was in jail, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim went with him and stayed with him, just so that he can continue to study and learn from him, right? And it's notable because what? Look at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And look at anybody who was close to him, right? If you look at the people who were like really close to him, the people where you read a hadith, I went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and this Sahabi was sitting with him. We left the masjid together. We came to the masjid together. I prayed behind the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I was traveling on a donkey with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I was traveling on a camel. Those people like that. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abu Bakr, and how can we say even before them, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Umar ibn Khattab, Uthman ibn Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib grew up in his household. He raised him like a son. Because his uncle Abu Talib, right, had a lot of kids, humble means, right? So the Prophet ﷺ took Ali into his household. The point though is that what? But then after that, right? What kind of man was Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anhu? What kind of man was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq? What kind of man was Umar ibn Khattab? Before he met Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and then after he met Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And then after he stayed so many years, and went through and was molded by, and taught by, and developed by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what did Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu accomplish after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? Some of the greatest futuhat in Islam were under the leadership of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. But who gets the real credit for that? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Because before his encounter with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the greatest ambition he could have hoped for was to be maybe one of the leaders of the Quraysh in Mecca. maybe be a notable tribesman amongst, the clans of and the tribes, and the people who come to Mecca. But that would have been it. That would have been his ceiling. That would have been his ceiling. And then after he meets Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Egypt, Syria, Persia, the Romans, Masjid al-Aqsa, Palestine, all of that is up. But that's after what? That's after he meets Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So similarly here, you have Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. These men, right, that was after them being with Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah and being impacted and affected by his teachings. Which also speaks to the issue of how important it is to have a teacher. How important it is to have a teacher. And if it's possible for you, and if you're able to, and if you're capable of doing it, right, as much as possible, making mulazim of that teacher. Right, as much as you possibly can. This is something that is very, very important. And this is something I would say, in recent years has become a greater possibility in Minnesota, where it wasn't before. It wasn't before. And in all honesty, brothers and sisters, part of the reason, wallahi, if I ever tell my story of like why I went to Medina, one of the main primary reasons is I couldn't find a sheikh who spoke English, who at the very least could even teach me Arabic. There weren't even any Arabic classes. And that was back in 2001, 2002. But now, mashallah, how many young brothers, some of y'all might even know, who've gone and studied abroad and then now come back. These classes that we're having right now and the other classes that are going on in other masajid, right? With other sheikhs, with other teachers who speak English, right? Aside from them knowing Arabic, of course, right? So it speaks volumes, brothers and sisters. It's something that is very, very important if you want to be a true, sincere student of knowledge. You got to be a student first of somebody. You got to be a student, and you got to be a student of somebody. I.e., you got to have a teacher. And there's a saying. It says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I'll let y'all marinate on that for a little bit, inshallah. Tayyib. So real quick, we want to finish about the bio of Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah and get into the actual lesson. But I just wanted to read real quick. This is Imam al-Dhahabi. And actually, you can all go back to this. A bio, maybe 25, 30 pages. There's a book translation of Al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyah, which we'll be teaching next semester, inshallah ta'ala. Bidnillah. But the English translation of that, there's a particular one where it has a nice in-depth bio of his. And I would highly encourage you to get it. You can readily get it offline, PDF, right? But it goes in depth to the strife and the struggles and even achievements of Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah. But this is just one little thing I want to read with y'all that his students said about him, right? We just mentioned that one of his students was Imam al-Dhahabi, right? This is him speaking about Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. And this is what he says. He says, it was amazing when he mentioned an issue over which there was a difference of opinion, and when he gave evidence and decided the strongest opinion, he could perform ijtihad, which means now he's making an independent ruling of the madhab, not independent of the Quran and the Sunnah, but independent of a madhab, right? That's what in general what a mujtahid is, right? Due to his fulfilling its conditions, right? So that should allude to something else too, that being a mujtahid and giving rulings has conditions. Not having a page or a channel on social media, that is not a condition of giving rulings. Al-Muhim. Anyways, he said, I have not seen one who was quicker than he at recalling a verse which pertained to the issue that he derived from it, nor a man who was stronger in recalling texts and referring them to their sources. The sunnah was in front of his eyes and upon the tip of his tongue. And when he says in front of his eyes, he means like when he's recalling a hadith, it's as if he's reading it. He's not. He's recalling it from memory, but it's so quick and so accurate It's almost like he's got the book right in front of him. That's what he means, like as if the sunnah is right in front of his eyes. He says, and it's upon the tip of his tongue with eloquent phrases and an open eye. He was a sign from the signs of Allah, yani ayah min ayatillah, in tafsir and expounding upon it. With regards to the foundation of the religion. And what's the foundation of the religion, y'all? Also known as the aqidah, right? And knowledge of the different opinions on issues. He was unequaled. This alongside his generosity, his courage, and lack of attention to the joys of the soul. He was quite possibly, his legal rulings in the various sciences reached 300 volumes. He was a prolific writer. He was not, mashallah, mashallah, that book is widespread. I'm going to relax for a little bit. He was wholly dedicated, right, to scholarship, right, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just for the sake of being called a title, but being at the service of the Muslims, right? 300 volumes, indeed more. And he was always saying the truth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both to the lay Muslim, the community, and the Muslims at large, as well as the leadership, as well as those in power. He wasn't disrespectful. He wasn't going, but he didn't shy away from speaking the truth. Tayyib. And he didn't care about or not caring for the blame that came to him, which, as we already mentioned, it did on numerous occasions. Whoever associates with him and knows him well accuses me of falling short with regards to him. So everything he just said, he's saying his support, like the supporters of Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah, people who know him, they're saying what he just said isn't enough. He's falling short. There should be more that he should be praising and saying and singing the praise of Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah. He's saying this ain't enough. And then the people who oppose him and differs with him accuse me of exaggeration. Like he's going too far. He's going overboard. He's saying too much. Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah can't be all like what he's saying. Come on now, Sheikh. Matter of fact, even in this day and time, I remember listening to somebody, Allah Musta'an, who will remain nameless, but they're a pretty notable, well-known speaker, where they said nobody can have the title of Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, right? Meaning, and I don't think I explained it earlier, the title Sheikh al-Islam. Essentially what that means is you're a Sheikh in fiqh, you're a Sheikh in hadith, you're a Sheikh in tafsir, you're a Sheikh in usul, you're a Sheikh in all of the science. So they call you the title what? The Sheikh of Islam, right? Now that's not a title he took for himself, right? Then that would have been, that would have been doing too much. But it is others who witnessed him who called him that, right? Now, طيب. And then Imam al-Dhahabi says, and I've been wronged by both parties, both his companions and his opponents, right? The people who say I'm not saying enough, and the people who say I'm saying too much. He said both of them are being unjust. Essentially he's trying to say like what? I'm trying to be as in the middle as possible. I'm trying to be objective. I'm just telling you the facts, what I see. This is what I know of him. Now, طيب. So khalas. طيب. With that being said, inshallah, we're going to now go ahead and start with the actual poem itself, inshallah. But before I move on, are there any questions? Are there any questions? طيب, خير. Inshallah. So I would encourage you, again, even if you use your phones, although personally, I prefer not, but if you don't have anything, right, to write with, take notes. I implore you and I encourage you to not just sit there, right? You'll be less engaged, right? But you'll definitely be more inclined to retain the information, remember the information, especially if you write it in your own words, right? Especially if you write it in your own words, however you need to remember it, unless I give you a definition or I tell you, yo, this needs to be written as it's said, right? If it's a definition of something, then you follow that way. Now, طيب. And again, for brevity, I'm just going to go ahead and read it, inshallah. طيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال المصنف رحمه الله نفعنا وإياه بعلمه في الدارين اللهم آمين. يا سائلي عن مذهبي وعقيدتي رزق الهدى من للهداية يسأل اسمع كلام محقق في قوله لا ينثني عنه ولا يتبدل. He says, and I should make a note. Sometimes when I'm translating, I'm not translating necessarily what's written up there or whatever. I might just be translating from my own head. So don't be like, oh, that's not what it says or whatever, right? So for example, in one of the books I was reading, the translation, it says, oh, one who asks, right? But when I translate, I was just like, oh, questioner, right? Because it's, right, that's just taste, preference, all right? But don't get thrown off by that. That's all I wanted to make a note of, all right? Play it. But it says, Ya sa'ili, O questioner, an madhabi wa aqidati, asking about my madhab and my aqidah. And we'll talk about what each of those things are. Madhab and aqidah, right? Isma, about my doctrine and my creed. Isma' kalama muhaqqiqin fi qawlihi. Pay attention or listen closely to the words of someone who is and I'm missing a part right here. But listen to the words of someone who is diligent in this. Someone who's an authority. Muhaqqiq, he's an authority in this. All right? He says, listen to this, what I'm saying. لا ينثني عنه ولا يتبدل. And this is certainly لا ينثني عنه ولا يتبدل. Right? On someone who does not change what they're saying, right? Or replace what they're saying. There's no replacement for it, nor does he change what he's saying, right? In his speech. La yanthani, right? Like a replacement. Wal badil or tabdil, it means, right, to change it, right? Or to change it again. Anyways, so, by the way, I just realized this bottom one, don't pay attention to that whole thing. That's not it. This part right here is actually the second part of the line. So I can be sure. Bismillah. So this right here is this part right here. All right? And then this right here is this right here. Certainly, bestowed with guidance, ruziq al-huda, is he who answers, or asks, for guidance. Man, that's who, lil hidayah, they're asking about guidance. Yas'alu, that they ask. All right, anyways, just wanted to clarify that. I just realized that while I'm reading it right now. So, first thing, Ya sa'ili, O questioner. So this speaks to, let me see if I got it here. Yes. This speaks to why the book was written. All right, so the first question is, why was this poem, why is it written? It was written in response to a questioner. Someone had a question, right? They came to Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and they asked him, and then they asked him about his aqidah and his madhab, right? And this is quite common. There's a number of different works and writings of Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah that was a direct response directly to somebody asking, somebody inquiring, somebody, trying to genuinely learn and understand. So for example, al-Aqidatul Wasatiyah, there was a judge, Shafi'i judge, from Wasit in Iraq, who was making Hajj, and he, on his way, right, he stopped and visited Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and he asked him to write a book, or like a creed, almost like a manual, right, of the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? And Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he initially refused. He was like, there's plenty of other works that are already in existence. There's no need for me to write another one, right? But the judge, he insisted. He said, listen, back home, the Tartars and the Mongols are invading the lands, which is causing and spreading corruption amongst the Muslims, right? And and he's knowledgeable because he's a judge himself. But he says, but I want something, right, from you, right, to write for me so that I can take home for me and my family, right? And then we can rely on that. And Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah proceeded to write what's now known as Aqidah Wasatiyah. And subhanAllah, it's a very beautiful work, right? It essentially starts out, I think maybe the first page, right? Which is like an introduction. And then after that, 116 ayat, one after the other, right? About all pertaining to different aspects of the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Each one proving, right, the stance of the Salaf, or the actual creed and the actual belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in regards to the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And then a small number of hadith, I can't recall if it's like but it's like less than 20. It's like less than 20 hadith, but also the same thing, right? Again, almost the entirety of the book is nothing but Allah said, Allah said, Allah said, His Messenger said, right? But the point though is that it was in response to a question, right? So that's the first thing. Why was the book written? It was in response to a questioner asking and inquiring about. Now, there's two things I want you to know about people who ask questions. You got two types of questioners. You got somebody who's genuinely trying to know, they want to benefit, they're curious, they're confused about something, whatever. That person is mustarshid. They're seeking and asking for guidance. And that person, right, it is incumbent, it is wajib to help and answer that person, right, and to entertain their questions and take time with them and to clarify for them. And as a matter of fact, that is the greatest type of cooperation between Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, that you're supposed to cooperate and work with one another upon bir, right, which is all types of good, and taqwa, which is God consciousness, right? And what, better, thing to cooperate and learn is when someone's asking about their deen and asking about their religion for you to be helping them. Tayyib? And then there's a second type of questioner, right? And they're not mustarshid. They're just looking to cause problems. They either have a different belief or they got a different opinion and they just want to debate and they just want to go back and forth and they just want to argue. You don't waste your time with those people. You don't waste your time with those people. Matter of fact, sometimes they might even try to come disguised as, hey brother, I just wanted to know, do you know about this or whatever? And then you tell them, Allah said, His Messenger said, the statements of the Salaf or the statements of the scholars, etc. And they're just like, what about this though? And what about this? And what about that? If it back and forth, listen, you tell them what Allah and His Messenger said, and you keep it moving. Tayyib. Khalas. An madhabi wa aqidati. So, madhab here can mean two things. He's asking about his madhab, and two possibilities. Either he's asking his madhab in fiqh, right? Which is not the case here, right? But could be that. And the other one is like your madhab. Your madhab. Your madhab in regards to, right, your approach to the deen, right? So, that means what? That when it comes to an understanding of an ayah, when it comes to an issue in fiqh, what do you use as a dalil? Like, what is it called? Epistemology. What do you go back to? The Quran, the Sunnah, ijma'. And when we say ijma', we mean the consensus, the agreement of the Sahaba or the Tabi'een, right? And those who follow them in that. And those are evidences for me. So if we have a debate, brother, did you hear about what they're talking about? We heard that they're saying this and this and this. What do you think about this? I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's go see what Allah and His Messenger said about this issue. Because I don't know. And I can't say one way or another till I go back to Allah and His Messenger about this. And there are some madhabs who that's not the first thing they go to. Some of them, it is the intellect. Right? And you hear it all the time. What do you think about this, brother? Well, in my opinion, I think, or I feel, Huh? Now, I'm not saying these people, that's their entire madhab, but that's usually, you hear people talk like that a lot because it's definitely leaning towards that as opposed to having the habit of, I'm unfamiliar with that, so, لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. I'm not going to put anything before I hear what Allah and His Messenger got to say about this. طيب? So there are some who put their intellect before, right? Such as the Mu'tazila, right? And that was a particular group, right? And in particular, a heretical group. They had a number of different beliefs that diverged and went away from the Quran and the Sunnah. Another example would be there are some who they take dreams to be an evidence, right? And that's what they go back to, or their Sheikh and whatever their Sheikh says, and that's it. But brother, it says here in the Quran, or Allah said here, or the Prophet ﷺ said here. Hey, my Sheikh said, khalas, and I'm not trying to hear nothing else. But it clearly contradicts what Allah and His Messenger said. I'm not trying to go against my Sheikh. Huh? Or for example, right, the Ithna Ashariya, right? For example, a particular faction of Shia, where they have the 12 Imams, right? And they consider them to be infallible. And it goes even deeper than that, to the extent where they even say that they have control over like molecules and, I mean, you might, Allah understand, where they say some things that enter into Tawheed Rububiyyah. But one of the things that they say is that they're infallible. And so if they make a statement, that's considered like wahy. No? So when he asks now, he says, what's your madhab? He's talking about in this way. When you make it, when you use evidence to prove your points, where's that coming from? The Quran and the Sunnah, right? Which of course, that's partly why we chose this book, and we'll talk about that later on, but you're going to see that's exactly what the madhab of Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah was to follow the Salaf. Matter of fact, another distinguishing characteristic was that a big part of his da'wah and his call was to call people back to that way and that understanding. Right? Listen, it's no problem for you to follow a madhab, but the madhab shouldn't be greater than the Quran and the Sunnah. Listen, it's okay for you to do this, but it can't be greater than Allah and His Messenger, right? And matter of fact, if you're following somebody and he's not more notable and have better understanding than Umar ibn Khattab or Uthman ibn Affan, etc., right? He called the people back to that. Anyways, aqidati. Where did I have that? Yeah, right here. Right. So now, what's the word aqidah mean? Aqidah is from the word aqada, right? Ain, qaf, dal, and it's a noun. The word aqidah is a noun. Excuse me. Aqada is a verb. The word aqidah is a noun. But anyways, to tie, to bind, to secure tightly. All right? That's what the word aqada means. And that's part of where the word aqidah derives its meaning from. And when you say aqidah, and we're talking about in the linguistic sense, not in the Islamic technical sense, but linguistically, when somebody believes something strongly in their heart, and they won't let that go, you would say that person, that's his aqidah. Even if it's not about Allah or, whatever. Right? That would be their aqidah. But it's something that a person believes, and more specific, they believe it strongly. That it's unwavering. So now aqidah, the technical sense, right, it is what is required upon every Muslim to believe in his heart, first and foremost regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what are his rights regarding Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Asma'i wa Sifat, and everything related to that. It starts there. And then, of course, the remaining pillars of Islam, right, which are what, everybody? Just real quick, everybody should know. Bismillah. We said Allah and the... Ya Jama'ah. In order. Al-Imanu Billah. And the angels. Wa kutubihi, the books. And the messengers. And the day of judgment. And destiny. That everything that happens is predestined. The good and the bad of it. Right? And then everything related to those things. Right? So to give you a quick example, when we say the things related to it, I already mentioned about Allah, right? And then the three categories of tawheed, all those things are related to Allah. And then when it means believing in the angels, the names that are mentioned in the Quran or in hadith, what they look, how they look, them being able to change into human form, that they don't disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their nature, like what they're created from, etc. Those are things related to it. Do you have to know all of the details? No. But those are all aqidah, and there's a certain level that you have to know. Similarly, right, with the books that are mentioned in the Quran or mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So what are a couple of examples real quick? We got the Quran, that's one, freebie, khalas. Another one. The Torah, right, of the Jews. The Injil, the Gospels of the Christians. What else? The Zabur of Dawood alayhi salam, the Psalms of David. Surah Al-A'la, the last ayah of Surah Al-A'la. The tablets of Moses Ibrahim and Musa alayhi salam, the tablets. Now, so now, those are related to, when we say you have to believe in the books, that's related to that. You need to believe in those books. There are others as well, but you got to believe in because those are mentioned by name in the Quran. And then there are others, but we don't know their names, so khalas, you just leave it in general. I believe there are books. There are other ones, I don't know what their names are. But we know those ones because they're mentioned in the Quran. And then, and it's like that for the rest of the pillars, right? But also the issue of Masailul Iman, right? About belief and disbelief, kufr, right? What do you call it? Khilafah, that's also considered an issue of, right, belief. When is somebody considered the Khalifa? Is it only with the Quraysh, right? Do they have to be from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc., right? These are all different issues related to Aqidah. But everything I just mentioned right now, what you should remember is what's up here. Should remember is what's up here. طيب. So now we're going to go رُزِقَ الْهُدَى مَنِ الْهِدَايَةِ يَسْأَلُ. So bestowed upon or given, yani rizq, right? And who's the bestower, everybody? Allah is Ar-Raziq or Ar-Razzaq, right? He's the one who provides. Now, typically, when we think of being provided, right, we think of material things. Food, shelter, clothing, housing, etc. But there are so many things that are rizq in our life that are material. Having a righteous wife, having a righteous husband, having healthy, righteous children, safety and security. These are all things that are rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Matter of fact, if you look at, there's a hadith Qudsi in Sahih Muslim where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, Ya ibadi, and He mentions it over and over and over again. He says, Kullukum ja'i'un illa man at'amtu. Right? Fastat'imuni at'imkum. Oh my servants, all of y'all are hungry except for the ones that I feed. Ask me to feed you and I'll feed you. Ya ibadi kullukum 'arin illa man kasawta. He said, all of you, oh my servants, all of you are naked, unclothed, except for the ones I clothe. So ask me to provide you with clothing, to cover you, and I will do so. Right? And he goes on mentioning all these material things. No doubt, all of this is rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should never forget that. But more importantly, ruziq al-huda, right? The word huda means guidance. This is also from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Guidance is from Allah azza wa jal. In that same hadith, because I didn't even start at the beginning of it, the first part, he says, Ya ibadi inni haramtu dhulma ala nafsi, right? And I made it for, oh my servants, I've made oppression and injustice forbidden on myself, and I make it forbidden on you amongst you, so do not oppress one another. But then he goes on to say, Ya ibadi kullukum dhalun illa man hadayta fastahduni ahdikum. Oh my servants, every last one of you are lost, misguided, and astray, except for those who I guide. Ask me for guidance, and I will give it to you, and I will guide you. And Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, in his response, he's saying, right? رُزِقَ الْهُدَى. Guidance is bestowed on what? On the one who asks for it. Even that line of that poem, right, is based on that hadith. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that hadith, and it's hadith Qudsi, meaning Allah said it, that I will guide the ones who ask of me. Does that make sense, y'all? So, one thing we need to know about hidayah, guidance, right? Guidance to beneficial knowledge and righteous actions. That's what huda is. Huda is beneficial knowledge and righteous actions. Right? It is so important for us to ask for that. The most guided. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ana atqa lillah. I'm the most God-fearing man, he said. And he used to make this dua often. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-huda wal-tuqa wal-afaf wal-ghina. Oh Allah, the first thing he said was what? I asked you for guidance and piety, righteousness. And then he asked for chastity, wal-ghina. And then after the spiritual needs, then he asked for the material needs. I.e., the rizq that I mentioned, all of it is from Allah, but most importantly, we have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our spiritual needs. Never rely on the fact that your family was you were born Muslim, family's Muslim. The community you are amongst is always Muslim. The country I'm from is Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ used to make that dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us that we have to make that dua. No less than 17 times a day. What is it, y'all? Everybody knows. Or we should know. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path of Allah. Guide us to the straight path. The point I want to make here is that guidance is in the hands of Allah, and He says as much. He's told Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Innaka la tahdi man ahbabt, walakin Allah yahdi man yasha." You do not guide who you love. If you're a dad or a mom, you don't guide who you love. If you're an older brother or sister, you cannot force guide your little brother or sister. If you're a teacher, a coach, if you're somebody in the community, you can't force guide people. You can't make them be guided. Guidance is in the hands of Allah. And he told Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that. And imagine his uncle. He had to watch his uncle. Not even like I heard my uncle. We've been communicating for a while and talking and stuff like that. He had to be there in the room on his deathbed. The last thing he's telling him, yo, unc, just say this one word. قُلْ كَلِمَةٌ أُحَاجُ بِهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Say this one word. Say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Right? Do you think Prophet ﷺ wanted his uncle to be guided? He's begging him. He said, not prayer, not jihad, not give sadaqah. Just say one word so that I can say something to Allah. With that, at least with La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. But Allah said what? You don't guide who you love. Guidance is in whose hands, everybody? They're in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? But the good thing is, the promise of Allah is what? فَاسْتَهْدُونِي أَهْدِكُمْ. If you ask of me, Allah promises He'll guide you. So that's, and then the other thing that I wanted to point out is about asking questions. Right? The asking questions, extremely important, brothers and sisters. And I already mentioned about having, about teacher, right? But this is absolutely essential and necessary in your deen. Do not rely on what you learned in Duksi. That's only going to get you so far. You have to continually, part of it. And not everybody's going to be a scholar. Not everybody's going to be a real student of knowledge. Right? But everybody, as a Muslim, asking, reading, learning, inquiring, that has to be a part of your Islam. And if you do so, رُزِقَ الْهُدَى, then that person will be granted and bestowed hidayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I only got a couple more things. He says, إِسْمَعْ كَلَامًا مُحَقِّقٍ فِي قَوْلِهِ. Right? And he says, listen. Essentially, he's saying what? Listen to somebody who knows what he's talking about. I'm a muhaqqiq in this. Right? And that's not him being braggadocious or him being arrogant or prideful or boasting, but it's just him stating to make that person feel comfortable, right? That, hey, I have a question. I got you. Don't worry about it. I know exactly what that issue is. I've researched it well. I know the differences of opinion regarding it. and here's your answer. Essentially, that's what he's doing. It's saying, don't worry. He's trying to put his mind at ease, right? Matter of fact, Yusuf alayhi salam, didn't he do this, right? He says, Inni, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He said, I'm diligent and I'm trustworthy. I know it in English, but I'm trying to remember. Inni hafidun ameen. Anyways, when Yusuf alayhi salam, when he speaks to the king, right? And he tells him, put me over the treasures, right? Make me the treasurer, right? And he says, and he tells them what? That I am diligent, right? And I am trustworthy. Is he bragging? Is he, no, he's just telling them, listen, I am capable and I'm aware and I know what I'm doing. Trust me. That's what he's doing, right? And then last thing, and this is really important about لا ينثني عنه ولا يتبدل, something that is characteristic of learning and asking, right? Is that through that you gain confidence. Through you knowing and having knowledge, that's where you get confidence of your religion. Not through your emotions. When somebody tells you something, it says something off kilter or inappropriate or disrespectful about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or it's about Islam. Should you be bothered by it? Absolutely. Any Muslim who has an ounce of iman, in any way, shape, or form, that Islam is being disrespected, it should bother you. But it should never make you out of pocket, because you know from knowledge, not just your emotions, that what they're saying is not true. That whatever character or picture that they might portray, you know that's not really the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or if they say these things about him or Islam, you know that those things aren't true. And you know that from facts, from the Quran, from the Sunnah. I can quote the hadith to you. I can tell you where Allah and his messengers, that ain't whatever you're saying, that's not, you get confidence from that. But if you don't know, then you can be dissuaded. Somebody can come, they got some good speech, they speak real well, they can pull things together like some pearls, and then you just follow along. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Inna min al-bayani la sihra. There are some people who they speak so well, it's comparable to sorcery. That they speak so well, they can get you to do anything. They can sell you the shirt off of your own back. You're like, hold up, this is my shirt. How I end up paying for this? But some people, they have the gift of gab. And so now, if your faith is simply by association and not an intellectual exercise, like you don't learn your deen, you'll be somebody yatabaddal. You're going to replace and flip-flop your religion. And Sheikh Taymiyyah, he's saying, listen, I'm not like that. لا ينثني عنه ولا يتبدل. I don't flip-flop. Why? Because I know based on the Quran, based on the Sunnah, based on scholarship, learning, research, reading, understanding, questioning, writing. Tayyib. And with that being said, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant all of us thabat, and that He make us all steadfast in our deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and grant us basira and furqan. And may He show us the truth for what it is and give us the strength, the courage, and sincerity to follow it. We also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us falsehood for what it is and give us the strength, the courage, and sincerity to stay away from it. Wa akhira da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. So, alhamdulillah, we'll stop here inshallah. I don't know if we had any questions, but if not, Bismillah. Then we just have a couple of announcements.